Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston and we're recording this episode on a Monday morning after Manchester United got back to winning ways, believe it or not, for 1-0 win against Fulham as the early kickoff on Saturday afternoon. Now for today's podcast, I'm joined by my colleague Tyrone Marshall, who's just had a week off actually. He was celebrating his 50th birthday. So Tyrone, how are you to begin with?
Yes, very good, Stephen, very good. No surprise to see more factual inaccuracy in your comments here.
Did you have a good week?
I did,
Enjoyable
yes,
week?
thank you. A relaxing week. Childcare for the first half and then, partying at the weekend.
So no more trips to Alton Towers then?
There wasn't any trips to Alton Towers, no. There's a trip to Blackpool in the middle of a storm. That was quite eventful, but no, it was relatively chilled week.
I think we'll save that story for another day maybe. But we've got plenty to talk about. In the first part, we'll dive into Fulham. The performance, obviously we'll pick out a few individual performances in the second part as usual, and we'll look ahead to Copenhagen, the Champions League game of course on Wednesday night. So we'll just begin. Crucial and gritty win in the end, a successive 3-0 defeats against Manchester City and Newcastle. The pressure was really mounting on Erik ten Hag. It really wasn't looking good. We spoke, and I know you weren't here, but we spoke of the importance of getting a win here, an away win, and they got it. They got it across the line, a Bruno Fernandes goal, which was so important.
Yeah, it is massive because they need wins at the moment, clearly, because things have been going so bad. I was going to say it was a great moment. I don't know if that's overstating it, maybe, given the quality of the opposition, but it was, you could tell it was a big moment at the end. You could tell it meant a lot with the celebrations. It was a relief of pressure, I guess, with the goal, and like I said, brilliant moment for Fernandez and brilliant skill to set up the shooting chance. It felt very similar to Brentford, to Sheffield United, to FC Copenhagen, and we know that those were, false dawns basically, weren't they? They were gritty wins against when it was two average sides playing each other, and it kind of felt like that again on Saturday. It was a win, it was a badly needed 3 points given where they are on the table in the start of the season, but you often hear coaches or managers talk about there being like a future in performances. Whether you win or lose, you look at the performance. I've said on this podcast before, it's a low-scoring sport. There's always going to be a bit of luck involved, and really you should be judging it on performances. Are those performances good enough to get you to where you want to be at the end of the season? And the reality is, even on Saturday, no would be the answer. But they did win. They spoke after Brentford and Sheffield United and all those wins about how it's a corner turned and stuff, and that was a false dawn. So they need to prove that this win can give them some momentum and confidence. But the reality is that they didn't play particularly well. I didn't think they didn't play brilliantly. Well, they didn't play close to brilliantly. And as valuable as it is to get the win, they need to improve the performances if this season is to be turned around and become even close to being successful.
There was a banner in the away end before the game that said "Play like you mean it," and that's been referenced on social media quite a lot in the last 48 hours. But as you just said, yeah, it was a spirited performance, but it was low in quality, wasn't it? It wasn't exactly a performance to celebrate. But look, like we say, a crucial win in the end. And obviously for Fernandez, it meant a lot for him. His 200th appearance for the club, a landmark moment. And when you're struggling and the chips are down, you need your biggest players to deliver. And he did that, especially I think after the criticism recently. After the City game, Roy Keane was kind of questioning his captain credentials. We've been here before, haven't we? This is nothing new. And that was a kind of response to his critics in that regard, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And he does get a lot of criticism. More, I think, for his demeanour, I guess, than his performance.
His petulance, isn't it? People take.
I think there's maybe an idea that has grown a little bit as well, that he doesn't help the team in some ways. But I think, the first half against Newcastle last week, I think it made it pretty clear that United... taking Fernandez out is clearly not the answer, and it was a big moment for him. His contribution and his how much he cares. He is someone who does play like he means it. I think he had a pretty good start to the season. He really inspired the Forest win. I think he was brilliant that day. Since then, he's drifted a bit. He's looked a bit too rushed with the ball at times recently, just looking over the top and for that early ball constantly. But we know what his contribution can be. He's easily the most successful signing of the last, possibly the whole 10 years since.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair statement.
Certainly in recent years. His contribution's brilliant. The debate over his captaincy isn't going to go away because that is just him and how he behaves. And I think it's a more than fair debate, to be honest with you.
Is he not a bit tired though? Because I agree, it's fair in the sense that you see his petulance on the pitch and his demeanour, his behaviour, and it can frustrate the life out of some fans, and understandably so, especially when the chips are down and you're having a tough game and he's throwing his hands up in the air. But who are you going to give the armband to? We've discussed this in the summer, and he was the only logical candidate to give the captain's armband to.
Well, he's the only logical candidate now when you look at that team, because he's one of the few that are guaranteed to start. I think Tonali's used 26 players in 16 games this season. In the summer, you'd have maybe said Varane would have a chance at the captaincy.
Well, Casemiro as well.
Casemiro, he's injured and should have been dropped anyway. There is clearly no other candidate at the moment. But I do think that the petulance Fernandez shows when things are going wrong, the second half at Liverpool last season was appalling from him, and the way he just lost his head. City again wasn't great. I think there's certainly a discussion about his, it's the way he plays, it's heart on the sleeve stuff, but he's just constantly on at referees, and as the captain, it's that the best way to do it. You talk about managing referees. Having Fernandez, who's just on them, whether the decision's fair or not, I'm not sure is the best way. On some subconscious level there, the referees must be sick of hearing him, and when they're reffing United, they must know they're going to get it, and I'm not sure that's the best approach. But in terms of leadership of the group and inspiring and playing, showing leadership on the pitch, I think he's easily the best candidate, and he does do that. He often stands up to be counted in those important moments, and there's clearly no other candidate at the moment, is there?
Samuel always makes the good point, to be fair to him, that he speaks multiple languages as well, which can only help, I suppose.
Which is important.
You think of Casemiro, I think his English lacks, doesn't it? And
yeah.
If you're going to be a captain in the Premier League, you need to be able to communicate with the referees.
With the referees and with the rest of the squad.
It's so important, isn't it? From the current captain then to the former captain, Harry Maguire, I love a statistic. He made the most aerial duels, or won the most aerial duels, I should say, of anyone on the pitch, and he also made the most clearances. He was my man of the match. Fernandez got given the man of the match award. But for me, I thought Maguire was excellent. He went down, I think, a minute in the game after a nasty collision. He also went down the second half. We thought it was related to that collision, but it was a hand injury. So look, he played through the pain barrier. Thought it was a really polished performance. He played a key role in the foundation at the back in keeping Fulham out. I thought it was really impressive.
Yeah, I did. And when he went down early in that game, he looked pretty unwell. If it had been said then he'd complete 90 minutes, it would have been amazing, because he looked as unwell as I felt on Sunday morning.
Could sound very stupid, but I've got him in my fantasy football team, and I thought he's going off. I thought that's absolutely typical.
Yeah, ruined it. But no, it was a good. He's been really good recently, and I think he's in that team on merit at the moment. And whatever's going on with Varane and picking Johnny Evans ahead of him is unclear, but it's clear that Maguire should be in that team. Whether Varane's playing or not, Varane would come in for Johnny Evans. Maguire he'd be third choice at least if everyone was fit now, and maybe more than that. And I think he deserves enormous credit, I think, for the character he's shown this season. He gets, we spoke countless times on this podcast about how he's a pantomime villain, really. The treatment he got from Scotland fans, from Arsenal fans earlier this season, just ridiculous, really. Like he becomes some sort of joke figure when actually, he's a very good international defender. And he clearly went through a difficult time. He went through a time where things were just going against him, and that Scotland game kind of summed it up. When he came on, Scotland fans were just cheering every pass without realising that every pass was actually finding a teammate, and he was playing quite well. And then he goes and scores an own goal.
You had to feel sorry for him in that moment.
You did have to feel sorry for him.
He just sometimes just doesn't get the breaks, does he?
No, well, that felt like that's the things that happen to Harry Maguire at the moment. But he could have easily left in the summer. Had United paid him up on the contract front, he would have left. But he also felt that he could stay and fight for his place, and that although it looked like he was far away, he perhaps wasn't, and that's been seen as Martinez has got this injury, fairly lengthy injury, and Maguire has got his opportunity and has taken it and has played really well. And I said, I can't remember which game it was, but it was, did he come back in at Brentford? So it would have been Copenhagen, maybe. He
scored the match win against Copenhagen.
Yeah, and that was the first time he'd ever started 3 games in a row under Ten Hag, which kind of shows how peripheral he has been. He started 2 in a row at the very start of Ten Hag's tenure. Then after that, he never got to 3 in a row. I think he'd barely got to 2 in a row, and now he's on 5, would it be? Something like that?
I think 4 league starts. So it's 6 successive starts at the moment. But in the league, it's 4 league starts he's made. And he made 8 league starts last season, so he's already halfway to the whole of last season. You just talked about Varane being on the bench. Do you think it's possible because we've talked about how Ten Hag likes to have Maguire on a certain side, and he talks about having the advantage of the build-up play. I think he's better on the left, but Ten Hag likes to have him on the right. Do you think that's possible that he's actually keeping Varane out of the team at the moment? I know we saw Johnny Evans come in, and he said it's for tactical reasons. There's obviously a few different factors to consider. Varane's not being fit, he's obviously been injured. But he came on towards the end of the game against Fulham. I expected him to start.
Yeah, I mean, when I asked someone in that head of the derby what the issue with Varane was, and they said tactical reasons, and my jaw nearly hit the floor. It felt hard to believe, but I think it is definitely related to build-up play. We saw it last season when Ten Hag spoke a lot about having a left footer. No, he's not got a left footer now, but having a left footer playing that side, to the point that he'd often play Shaw instead of Martinez because he wanted those passing angles. I mean, they're not really playing that way that much at the moment, so it's less relevant, but he clearly values it a lot. Maguire and Evans have got an understanding, because they played together at Leicester, of how to, who does what in the build-up.
It's a funny sentence, that in itself, isn't it?
Well, it's an incredible sentence.
Manchester United in 2023, you're talking about our partnership.
I know. And it kind of shows up. It shows where they've ended up as well, that they've got that. I mean, part of the thing with Varane's injury record is disastrous for United, but also I don't think he's been consistently brilliant since they signed him. He's been good, but he's not. I don't think he's been consistently world class. He's probably not strong enough games together to maybe reach that level. But when I was thinking about it after the derby, I thought in the cold light, it's probably not. It looks a crazy decision, because you're picking a 35-year-old Johnny Evans who got relegated last season ahead of a 4-time Champions League winner and 93 cap France international.
You could go on, couldn't you?
You could go on. It looks crazy, but Varane hasn't been, he hasn't been undroppable for United throughout his time there. So maybe it's not that controversial a decision, but it shows in a way how bad and how uncertain performances have been this season. That you look now, the first day of the season, he picked 10 of what would have been his best 11 easily, apart from Hojlund coming in. You look at it now, and maybe 5 of them in the team. Some have been injured, some have been dropped. Some, like Antony and Rashford, probably should be dropped. And you've got players like Johnny Evans, who only signed on deadline day, is suddenly in the team. Maguire and McTominay, who Ten Hag tried to sell this summer, are now in your best team. And it shows how quickly things have turned since the opening day of the season, purely because of performances. But it also feels like it's, Ten Hag doesn't really know where to go at the moment. He's kind of stumbled across this team, and it's a team for the scraps, isn't it? Maguire, Evans, McTominay, they're going to get stuck in.
A West Ham way of playing that.
Yeah, they're going to play like they mean it.
Yeah, it's very nicely done.
But it's not, you wouldn't, if Ten Hag was sitting down and looking at his players at a list now and picking his best team, you still think he'd want Mason Mount in there, he'd want Varane and Martinez in there. And obviously Martinez is injured at the moment, but he kind of stumbled back on this, like, I don't say old-fashioned, but kind of like this British get stuck in,
get results across the line.
Yeah. But like I said, the performances have got to come at some point as well.
I mean, Wan-Bissaka I thought was good as well. His first start since coming back from injury. Obviously, he replaced Dalot midweek against Newcastle. To be fair to Dalot, I mean, he was terrible against Newcastle, but he made a great clearance in the first half on Saturday, which was brilliant. But look, it was fantastic to have Wan-Bissaka back, and we've talked about the injury crisis so much. They've now got half of their first choice. Well, they've got Varane back as well, so you've got Varane and Wan-Bissaka, so it's half of the first choice defensive line, isn't it, back? And that's a huge boost.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And Wan-Bissaka's similar to Maguire, I guess, in a way. He deserves a lot of credit for the way he's turned it around. And he did it last season. I think that halfway through last season at the World Cup, we all thought he was done. He played 4 minutes and then finished last season as the best right back. As I've said a few times now that I think that right back battle feels quite close, but it's quite close because I'm not sure either are necessarily the answer.
I would agree with that, and I have agreed with that, but I do think Wan-Bissaka is now ahead of Dalot.
I think he's getting ahead of him, and you're right that, Dalot is just so inconsistent. Like defensively against Newcastle, he was just, all over.
It was a mess, wasn't it?
Really.
Yeah.
And he's just incredibly inconsistent, and I think I'm not sure why I wouldn't play him at left back, to be honest. I'd play Regulion there. I think Reguilon's done all right when he's played. He seems to be in and out of the team, but yeah, I think you're right that Wan-Bissaka has definitely forced himself ahead of Dalot now. And if you were going to sign a new right back and keep one of them as a squad player, then I would keep Wan-Bissaka ahead of Dalot, I think, and maybe accept that Dalot would move on. But I still think that next summer, presuming he's still in charge and this season makes a recovery, I think a right back would be high on the list of priorities. But yeah, out of those two, I think Wan-Bissaka is producing the more consistent performances. He maybe can't hit, Dalot at his very best has maybe got an extra level that Wan-Bissaka hasn't, especially going forward and what he can do on the ball.
Just not saw that player since October 2022.
No, we haven't. And he started really well under Ten Hag last season, but like you say, he dipped dramatically after the World Cup, and now it's just hugely inconsistent, really.
We can't end this first part then without mentioning the controversial VAR decision. Would football even be football without these controversial refereeing decisions these days? It's just inevitable, isn't it? Scott McTominay also feels inevitable. He pops up at the back post, thinks he puts United ahead. Obviously, VAR reviews it. Harry Maguire is deemed to be interfering with play because he was in an offside position. It was a controversial moment. What was your take on it? Because it's almost a subjective offside, which is absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it wasn't the most controversial VAR decision of the weekend, was it?
There's quite a few.
fair to say. But yeah, it was one of those where that's something that would never be spotted if you were just reffing the game as the referee and the assistants are. You're never going to spot. He didn't make contact with the ball. It's a very difficult offside to see. That's just never going to be given in real time. But if you're going to use VAR for offsides, which in a way is the easiest thing to use it for because it's factual, or most of the time, apart from the time when it wasn't. But, it's factual. They draw the lines. They normally get it right, unless, like Newcastle, they can't actually see the player. But, they normally get it right. They draw the lines. He's off or he's not. And like you say, it was kind of subjective of whether is he interfering. I think he probably was interfering. And if you're going to use VAR for offsides, which in my view you should do, then it is offside, I think. That's just...
You've got the argument that, look, he's nowhere near Garnacho, Maguire. But then, if Maguire wasn't there, surely that defender would be marking Garnacho. So it's like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the old, I can't remember who said it now, it was a Brian Clough, but it's the old quote of if you're not interfering with play, then what on earth were you doing there?
Yeah, very true.
It's a free kick that's coming into the box right where, basically where Maguire is. It's to the back post and he's attacking the back post, isn't he? And the ball goes over his head, but he was distracted. He was certainly distracting a defender. So yeah, I think if you're going to use it like that, then it's inevitable those decisions are going to happen, and I can see why it feels like the game's being re-reffed, and it's almost anti-goal when you're looking at things like that. But like I say, the offside decisions are factual, and it did feel like he was interfering with play. So I can see why it's given, even though it feels that you watch it in real time and you think there's no way that goal's being disallowed, and then they find a way to disallow it. I can see why there's frustration with it, but I can also see why it was given.
That's some great sitting on the fence there.
Thank you. Yeah.
Quite impressive, actually.
Pick those splinters up.
That'll be it for part one, and we'll be back in a moment for part two. Welcome back to part two of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, I felt that was a bit upbeat actually, the first part, which is quite refreshing change after some negative podcasts and some inquests. But obviously the performance wasn't great, as we touched upon. Let's get stuck into Antony then. Exactly, your reaction says it all there. He came off in the 65th minute. He was actually booed off, Tyrone. Palestra replaced him. It was just another mess of a performance. We said it all last season. Our patience was running out. We expected bigger things this time around. It's just not happened. He's remained the same player. 86 million, he looks worth an absolute fraction of that, doesn't he? And at the end of the day, the responsibility has to fall on Ten Hag, because as we've said multiple times, this was very much his man and very much his signing. Yeah, absolutely. He doesn't look like he's worth £8.6 million at the moment. That was absolutely horrific on Saturday. I don't think it's too harsh to say. It's been horrific for weeks, though, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. Just months. A complete passenger, not influencing games. If you were looking for excuses or reasons for it, he's obviously had these off-pitch issues this season that he's had to deal with that are still ongoing. But it's not like these performances have come after that. Last season, he was not really good enough. There was the odd moment, but just not really good enough, and I don't see what he's bringing to the party. For me, he cannot be in the team this week. You're almost playing with 10 at times with the way he's playing at the moment. And my biggest concern, and I know he clarified this in his press conference last week, but when Ten Hag said after the derby, we can't play like Ajax, we've got to be more direct. And he said earlier this year he wants them to be best transition team in the world. He clearly seems to have adapted to thinking, we'll just play on the counter now. Why have you signed Antony? Because it's pretty clear he's going to offer nothing on the counter. He's one-paced, which is, for a winger, fairly slow. I'm sure he's quicker than me, but, for
you'd have him.
It'd be close race. Close. But for a winger, you don't look at him and think he's the winger you want on a counter, picking the ball up 5 yards inside his own half or on the halfway line, because he ain't going to stay clear. We mentioned several times how he uses his left foot to dribble and just dribbles out wide rather than into goal, which is you want on the counter. He's not a winger signed to play in that way. And Ten Hag signed him from Ajax as his marquee signing, his £85 million signing. So if you're not intending to play like Ajax, why have you spent so much money on a player who can't do anything but that? He's the type of player, and I've said it on the podcast a couple of times now, you get him the ball in the final third, and I think he can look dangerous. I looked at all his goals last season. Every one of them, he gets the ball in the final third when United are on the front foot and attacking. And he's either played through, running in on goal, or he gets it in that inside right channel and basically does a Robin, cuts in, whips it in. But from none of them is he doing what Rashford sometimes does, where he picks it up way out wide or near his own halfway and runs at players, because he beats players. He can't do that. When I heard those quotes from Ten Hag, I thought if I was United, that would really worry me about it. It struck me as a manager who had lost his way, basically.
He tried to clarify it in his next press conference, but I still didn't really buy into it myself.
I didn't really buy into it, to be honest. And it does, like I say, that I think he must, Ten Hag must look at Antony and know that he can't play on the break. He's not, he's a winger for a dominant team when he's being passed the ball in the final third, when your team, when United are playing or Ajax are playing in the opposition's half, which Ajax would have done under Ten Hag all the time in the Eredivisie. You're basically dominating the game. Every opposition player's in their half, and you find Antony in a little bit of space in the final third.
It's like Jadon Sancho at Dortmund, actually. It's parallels to how that style.
And they can do some damage there. But the way United are playing at the moment, the positions, and maybe this is, as brutal as we've been to him at the start of this segment, maybe it's not all his fault in that he is, this is a team that's not set up to get the best out of him now. And I know in the summer there was some hope that Hojlund would transform that his hold-up play would allow him, to play higher up the pitch, to get higher up the pitch and to get Antony in those positions. And I think there is an acceptance among the coaching staff that that's where he needs the ball. But at the moment, it's just not happening. And if they're not intending to play that way, then frankly, they've wasted £85 million. And, that for a club who's pretty tight on FFP, that's
it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. And I think he's obviously persistent with him because he is worth that much money, and he did have to push so hard to sign him, because otherwise it just doesn't make sense. But I guess at some point you've just got to kind of cut your losses. I mean, maybe sell him, but take him out of the team to begin with, obviously. Yeah. Palestri came on, as we've said, and he did actually quite well to set up Fernandez for that goal. He is probably below the level to start. I think we can all agree on that, but he can sometimes be effective from the bench, and I guess that's just who he is at the moment and where he is at this stage of his development.
Yeah, he did really well for the goal, and he was good off the bench. He can influence games a bit off the bench. We've said in the past he's a bit old school, and he's right-footed, right winger, quite direct. He's not really played well from the start.
He's poor against Bayern Munich when he got his big chance.
He was, yeah. And he just, he doesn't look at the level. It's the same with Hannibal, really. I don't think either of them look of the level to be Manchester United players, or for where Manchester United want to be, really. I guess the one that would or could potentially put him under pressure is Ahmad, who is injured at the moment. You're right, there's two reasons, I guess, Antony's in the team, because there's pretty much no other option out there. Unless, which is what I'd do, I'd play Fernandez out there or Mount out there at the moment. I think that's probably the solution. And also, like I say, Ten Hag is hitched to him in a big way, really. I think the way United went about signing Antony was poor last year. The fact they got it done on deadline day. They in mid-July when
the price just went up and up and up.
In mid-July when we were on tour, very early at the start of the tour in Bangkok, we were told that the Ajax were asking too much and United were walking away, and that was when Ajax wanted about 60 million quid.
Which would have been
too much. They ended up paying 86. So You know, Ajax, and I think Van der Sar has basically said it, you know, Ajax had United's pants down, basically, for a player who's drastically underperforming. So, you know, I think there is pressure on Ten Hag to get a tune out of him, which is why he keeps playing. Their fates are going to be intertwined, quite possibly, in a big way, especially if, you know, if Ten Hag drops Antony and manages to turn it around, then maybe he'll kind of get a pass on it. But if he can't turn it around and Antony keeps playing like this, you know, they almost come as a package now. So, but you know, like I say, I don't think he can be in the team this week, so I'll be playing Fernandez or Maguire.
Talk about the other attackers then. I mean, Garnacho, I don't think he was very good in the first half, but I actually thought he was way better in the second. He really improved. He was their biggest attacking threat, I thought, for large parts of after half time. I felt a bit sorry for Rasmus Hojlund up front. I am starting to feel a bit sorry for him. I mean, I'm watching him and he's getting criticised for being anonymous. Okay, that's fair enough, but he's getting absolutely no service. The lad is feeding off absolute shreds. And again, I mean, the attack was blunt, but they're just not getting the ball or creating chances. No,
they're not. I think there's a bit of both in that. They're not getting the ball to him enough, but
I guess when he gets those moments, and there's sometimes been half chances, and he's not a Harry Kane. He's not going to capitalise on a half chance every single time.
But this is it. This is kind of what we expected. He's very raw. If you put Harry Kane in that team and United are still playing as they are, you know, I'd bet you Kane would have got 3 or 4 Premier League goals.
He would have scored the Derby goal when he got played through.
Yeah,
Kane would have scored that.
Yeah, Kane would have scored that. You know, and Kane would create chances himself. He would, you know, he'd find a way to create a chance or do something, and that's what great strikers do. And Hojlund isn't there yet. There's a lot of potential there. You know, we saw it. The second goal against Galatasaray, especially, was like that was like there's something potentially special here, but. You know, he's raw. United accepted he was raw when they signed him. They said he was, you know, I think they described him as a rough diamond, and that's what you're going to get. And we've said it. You know, I remember saying it on this podcast at the start of the season. What is a good season for Hojlund personally this year? Probably 15 Premier League goals. That's not good enough for United, and that's the problem. That they've got a striker who is learning his trade, playing as Manchester United's number 9, and when suddenly Rashford isn't scoring, Antony never really scores. There's even more pressure on him to score, and he's not scoring, so there's even more pressure on him to score.
And I mean, that's unfair as well on a young lad. It's a result of the club's plan, isn't it?
Yeah. It is unfair on the young lad, but United have created that situation by gambling, I guess, on a 20-year-old. I mean, I do think he'll come good at some point, but it might be 2 years down the line, and then you've wasted 2 years blooding in a number 9, basically. So, you know, I could always see the merits with not signing Kane this summer. Certainly, I mentioned previously of an age profile of the team, and we've seen what's happened with Casemiro this year, where suddenly it looks like you should.
Then if you had, I mean, we don't want to harp on about Kane too much because that ship sailed. But if you had Harry Kane coming in, you've got your experienced striker who's 30 years old now, is he? And then you've got your young one coming through. So it would be the perfect blend, wouldn't it?
It would be the perfect blend. You know, I know Ten Hag wanted something like that. In reality, I think spending 170, 180 million pound on 2 strikers was
not realistic
in United's budget this summer. You know, they pushed the boat out on 72 for Hojlund, I think. But you know, given that scenario, maybe they should have looked at someone other than Hojlund, someone ready to come in and hit the ground running, because we are in this. And like I say, I have sympathy for him that he's ended up in an underperforming team now. But like I say, if Harry Kane was in that team, United would have scored more goals and be higher than where they are now. And that's clearly not to pin the blame on Hojlund. You know, if you're making a list of players who are at fault for things this season, it'd be near or very near the bottom. But this was always inevitable. I think that there was going to be times where he would struggle, where he would look raw, and it's happened pretty much at the start of his career. Really, he's also got the 3 goals in the Champions League, none in the Premier League, and the more it goes on, the more he's kind of feeling that pressure. And like I say, it's a bigger pressure just because none of the forwards are providing goals, and it's not clear to see where goals are going to come from, really. And I've mentioned it previously. You look at the way they're playing at the moment and the way they played on Saturday, and the best teams, you can look at them and think, right, I know how City want to score a goal, I know how Liverpool want to score a goal, I know how Arsenal want to score a goal, Tottenham already, I know how they want to score a goal. I watch United play at the moment and I'm like, I don't know what the plan is here to score a goal. I don't know how it's
But we've been seeing this for
just going to happen like
12 weeks now.
Yeah,
it's so frustrating. It's been since the first game of the season.
Changed,
no.
Yeah.
And I mean, me and Samuel said the problem is with the style of play. If you're going to change the style of play, you do it in a pre-season. You need 6 weeks to really get your principles across. it's not something you really radically change during a campaign. During the season.
Yeah.
So
I thought it was a good line from Rio Ferdinand at the weekend when he said if he asked those United players, what is your style of play, none of them would be able to give him a satisfying answer. And I thought that's probably true. And even if you ask Ten Hag at the moment,
Rio Ferdinand says something sensible.
I know, incredible.
Stop the world.
I know the two of you are close.
Best friends, absolute best
friends. I just thought it seemed a good description, because I bet if you asked all these United players, what's the style of play? When you're on the pitch, what's the aim?
I think they say
it's not there.
They definitely have an answer, but whether they believe it is another matter.
Well, that's it. Whether we'd look at it and go like, oh, I see it, or they'd explain it and we'd be like, right, well, that's a concern because it looks nothing like that on the pitch. And the same with Ten Hag. It'd be interesting to hear Ten Hag say at the moment sit down, sit in this chair here and tell us what the style of play is and what you want the players to be doing.
Well, he was at the Football Writers Association Awards dinner last night, so maybe we can get him in the hot seat at the MEN's offices. I'm sure we can extend the invite. We'll come on to Rashford quickly then to end his part. He was obviously out of the team. He had a birthday party on Sunday night after the derby. Ten Hag was asked, look, if he was fit, would he have started? He said yes, which was interesting, and I guess that kind of drew a line into that issue. I think it's important that he's been out of the team, because we've talked about his form, his muddling performances. He's been awful, not the same player as he was last season, which is the best year of his career. And it's probably going to help him that he's not been in the starting side. Take him away from it for a bit, put him back in eventually, but it's going to bode well, surely. It's going to help him.
Well, hopefully.
You'd hope.
Something has to change. Like I say, you can almost look at that last season, and I think there's more going on, but last season was almost built, a lot of it was built on Casemiro and Rashford. Rashford provided the goals, Casemiro provided the steal, and suddenly they looked a much better team. They were keeping a lot of clean sheets. They were solid defensively. They had more control in midfield, and Rashford would just do something out of nothing and score a goal. Both of them have been poor this year, and it's all fallen apart. And I think that it's clearly, I think that's linked. I do think there's more at play, but it is linked. In
terms of solutions, though, Rich said it, like Solskjaer used to carry on just playing players back into form, just keep on selecting them, hope they get a goal. But that's not really worked, has it, with Rashford?
It hasn't really worked, no. And he didn't finish last season in great form, to be fair. But the problem with Rashford, I think, is he goes through these spells where he's streaky, which is what happened after the World Cup last year in a good way, in that he's scoring goals and suddenly he believes everything he's going to touch is going to turn to gold and he can't stop scoring. And then it goes wrong for him and it's like his confidence is just shot. And I'm trying to remember what game it was recently. It might have been Brentford, I think, where ball came to our wide and he didn't even control it. It just went straight through him and out for a throw-in, and you could sense like the groans around Old Trafford. And I think it's been clear that the crowd are starting to turn and get frustrated again with him, because he does give that demeanour at times when he's low on confidence and struggling. As a fan watching, you would get frustrated with. Like I say, maybe a break out the team will do him some good. I thought that would be the case last year, or the Solskjaer Ranić year, when he post Euros, when he had the surgery on his shoulder injury, been going on for a while. He came back and scored a couple of goals, but then totally lost his way again. I just find it really hard to call with Rashford whether a spell out of the team will do him any good or not. It's
the ultimate confidence player, isn't he?
Which you can, in a way, you can see why Solskjaer played him, because the only way to get your confidence back is for something good to happen. But the longer something good doesn't happen, then the lower your confidence gets, I guess.
Catch-22, isn't it?
Absolutely.
No problem. We'll be back in a moment for part 3, but that's it for part 2.
Whether it's the legendary Lionesses, grassroots or expert analysis of the women's leagues, Women's Football News has it all covered. A brand new monthly magazine packed with news, interviews and expert opinion. Don't miss Women's Football News. Pick up a copy today from participating retailers. Women's football is here to stay, and so are we.
Welcome back to part 3 of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, Tyrone, you alluded to it in the first part, but we've talked about the 2 magic words, turning point. We've talked about the words turning point quite a lot in the last few weeks, and it's yet to come. You said it was a false dawn a few times. Could this be the turning point? Because we've got Copenhagen in midweek. It's going to be a difficult game. They were well organised, they were well drilled at Old Trafford. And obviously a late goal was needed. Andre Onana as well, he made that penalty save. So it's not going to be easy, and they really need momentum. Whether they are able to produce it, it remains to be seen, I guess.
They do, yeah. The thing is, it felt like they had momentum after beating Copenhagen at home when they'd won 3 in a row and, like you say, the penalty save. But the performances were never great, and it got exposed pretty quickly against 2 decent teams in, well, one very good team in Man City and a decent team in Newcastle, albeit it was a pretty ropey starting 11 that managed to thrash United. So, you know, I just think it's hard to say if it's a turning point at the moment. I mean, it's like that post-Brentford game where they've got a good run of fixtures now. I don't think it'll be easy in Copenhagen. If they win that, then fair play to them. I do think they'll have to play better to win that game. Luton at home, they really should win that. You know, if they're not beating Luton at home, I think you've got serious concerns. But I think the only way it's going to feel like a turning point is if they start playing better. And I think everyone felt when they were beating Brentford, Sheffield United, Copenhagen at home, that, all right, the wins were great, but I don't think anyone looked at that and thought they're back on track and they have turned a corner. They've been getting by, and sure enough, when they played a good team, that was proven to be the case. So at some point, if they grind out a win playing badly tomorrow, or get a draw playing badly and on Wednesday, and get out of there with a draw. It's hard to say because a draw is not really a good result for them, I guess. So, if they get another shaky win, if they get a win by an odd goal against Luton and don't play particularly well, then it's been a decent week. But you need to see, at some point, we need to see performances that you can look at and say, right, I see where they're heading now. They're going to cause better teams problems, and that only then is this going to start to feel like a turning point.
I mean, the international break would be fantastic for that, but the problem is they're all bloody internationals. Yeah. They're not exactly going to be around Carrington staying around for training.
A few days.
Any changes then? I mean, you talked about maybe placing Mason Mount or Bruno Fernandes on the right, of course. Does Varane come back into the team? It would be another big decision to start Johnny Evans and Maguire, although they have kept a clean sheet. So I would say Ten Hag's probably a bit tempted to play them.
Yeah, I would say he probably is tempted to play them, actually.
It would surely be a big story if Varane was benched again, because you'd think he's definitely fit now.
Well, he's clearly fit now. I presume he was fit against City. We were told it was tactical reasons, and so that's 2 league games in a row. He's not played for tactical reasons. And to be fair, the one area that's actually been performing fairly well recently is the defence. I think defensively they have improved a bit.
It couldn't have got much worse though.
Couldn't have got much worse.
First 6 or 7 games of the season.
Yeah, but they're
terrible.
Yeah, they do seem to have improved a bit. So maybe you do play the same team. I'd probably play Reguilon and look for balance at left back. Do you bring Amrabat in midfield? I'm not sure. I mean, he's not played particularly well so far, but he's another that Ten Hag pushed for. And although he's only a loan, you feel like he needs to kind of make it work and show that he knows why he wants these players. And then I can't be having Antony in the team at the moment. So I would make a change there, and I would look to play maybe Fernandez on the right and bring Mount back in midfield, because Mount's another that Ten Hag wanted. United spent up to 60 million on him, and now he's what is Ten Hag's plan for him?
That's another. It's a messy situation. I think the problem is, where is he going to play? I mean, he was brought to the club to play as a deep line. He obviously made his name as a creative player, number 10. And we've been calling for him to play on the wing. But surely Ten Hag sees him as a midfielder. And he's not playing at all, really, is he? That's the problem.
Well, he's not playing at all now. And you signed a £60 million midfielder that suddenly you've lost faith with.
But can a midfield of Casemiro, Fernandes and Bruno Fernandes work? Oh, just repeated Bruno Fernandes.
Casemiro, Fernandes and Bruno
Fernandes. He's all over the place. Mason Mount, Bruno Fernandes and Casemiro. Can that work? Because we saw it a few times at the start of the season. We said it looked unbalanced. It wasn't working with Mount in. He was taken out of the team.
I mean, I think it can work if everything around it is working. But the problem is that Casemiro came back and looked like suddenly his legs had gone and he couldn't move. And that's clearly a problem for a holding midfielder. You've got to be mobile in the Premier League, and suddenly Casemiro looked immobile, which makes it a big issue. Other than that, it should be able to work. You see the best teams do that. I mean, Liverpool's midfield 3 is similar to that. I guess they're playing with no real holder. When McAllister and Szoboszlai and Gravenberch are playing, there's not really a natural holder there. City will play Rodri and then Bernardo and Alvarez. I know Bernardo's been playing deep, but they can often last year they were playing 2 number 8s. So I think the most successful sides will look to do that and get more players committed forward. But like you say, it wasn't working. Probably feels a risk at the moment to do it because the team looks broken.
I think you're right when you say if everything's working around them though, because if you hark back to the start of last season, when that team was really working well, just after Casemiro arrived, and Eriksen, Casemiro and Fernandez looked brilliant together.
Yeah, they did.
If you put Mount in the team back then, it probably would be a different story. We'd be talking about what a good signing Mason Mount's been.
Yeah.
He's transitioned to that role perfectly.
Yeah.
It's a different story, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's, it's the same sort of thing with Hojlund, I guess. They've joined an underperforming team and it makes it harder for them to settle in. And, I've said previously that Ten Hag signed the Mason Mount he saw at Vitesse, which is like 6 years ago now. He's played all over the place since then for Chelsea. So it's a big ask to kind of go back to what he was doing then and reinvent himself as he was then. But, you've got to make it work at some point. The midfield is clearly an issue. Casemiro has made it an issue. The fact he's not there now might ease things a bit. But Eriksen has probably been their best midfielder this season. He's come on and changed games in terms of the control he provides. But the thing is, when you have Casemiro and Eriksen in the same midfield, you're really short on legs.
You just get overwhelmed sometimes, don't you? Which, I said I would have started Eriksen in the derby. But when he plays, it shows you what happens. It just feels inevitable against the better sides. It just doesn't work really.
No, it feels like there's a lack of physicality and power, I guess, in that midfield that they're getting. We've seen it too often this season. That midfield is getting bypassed and outrun too easily, and that's a big issue to fix.
It would be a disaster, it's fair to say, if they crashed out of the Champions League, wouldn't it? We've talked about what it means financially and the draw for players in the summer transfer window. It's not looking good though. It's been a poor start. That win was so important against Copenhagen. Yeah. They do need a win. You said maybe a point, but they do need a win this week, don't they, in the Champions League?
Yeah, they've got to win. I was looking at it thinking Copenhagen away is difficult. I went there last year to cover City and the atmosphere really surprised me. Actually, it was really intense and City drew 0-0, and a man sent off after half an hour. But it's clearly not an easy place to go to. Like I say, I thought they played pretty well at Old Trafford. Certainly they started very well. They could have been ahead, 2-0 ahead in the first 15 minutes. Bayern Munich only won 2-1 there and scored 7 minutes from the end. They were 2-0 up in Galatasaray in Istanbul with 4 minutes to go. So
when you're saying that, it sounds ominous, doesn't it, really?
Well, they're clearly a decent side, aren't they? That's what I'm saying, and that makes it tricky for United in a very hostile atmosphere. And this group of players have hardly given the impression that they relish hostile away atmospheres in recent years.
We could give a list of examples.
You could give a list of examples, yeah. So they have got to win. And you look at it like that and you think, that point's not bad. But in the context of the Champions League group, a point's disastrous. And even if they win and if Bayern beat Galatasaray, United still only be 2 points ahead of Galatasaray going to Istanbul. And as we just said, I don't think anyone would have faith in them winning in Istanbul. So they're still in a dangerous position in the Champions League, and crashing out would be a disaster. I think it's pretty clear that top four is already very, very difficult for them this season.
So winning the Europa League, is it not the best route to Champions League?
Maybe that is the solution.
That's a trophy as well.
That's a trophy, yeah. Maybe that's the solution. But it just also for the standing of the club, because they are, I said it after maybe the Galatasaray defeat, I think, when they lost the first two, and they're almost beginning to feel like invited guests into the Champions League. It's like, let's get United in for the old time's sake. And then the next year they finish sixth again and they go back into the Europa League. They're not in the Champions League consistently. I think on only 2 occasions in the last 10 years have they been in it in successive seasons. Already now you're thinking, well, they're probably not going to be in it again next year. They might not even make the knockout round. Over the last 10 years, they had 4 knockout ties, maybe 4 or 5.
United fans used to obviously mock Arsenal fans for celebrating getting 4th each year, but getting 4th each year would also feel significant at this point.
Yeah,
get kicking on from that. It gives a foundation.
Yeah, the foundations and the continuity, and also for players. Players looking at United now are like, well, are you going to be in the Champions League? Or you're not, because you're not there that often, and then when you are there, you're making no impact in it. The PSG result is that's the only significant thing they've done in the Champions League in years.
In the quarterfinals twice, hasn't it?
I think quarterfinals twice, yes. They've won 2 knockout ties. Olympiacos, which was a disaster in Greece. It's going back 10 years now, but a disaster in Greece, and the great comeback. And then PSG, which was clearly an amazing moment. But other than that, that's it in 10 years that they've won as Champions League knockout rounds. That you can't keep trumpeting yourself as one of the biggest clubs in the world, one of the best clubs in the world, when you've got that record and you just can't make any impact.
But you're thinking of you're forgetting their commercial value, Tyrone.
It's
all about the commercial value.
Twitter followers are phenomenal.
The profit and the engagement on social media. That's what really matters in football.
Well, this is when we're mocking them, but they make it very easy to mock them because they trumpet that, and they've got to trumpet that because it brings in money. So we do understand why they do that and what a commercial behemoth they are and how successful they are. But it makes it very easy to mock when they're then a joke on the pitch, and that's what it is. And it's like you just roll out, you just roll them out every year, like let's get United back in, and then buy and toy with them in Munich, and it's like these lads going on. They like, do you remember United when they were good? Go back to the Europa League, lads. They need to start qualifying for this competition every season and to make an impact in it and win some important games. And it just doesn't happen at the moment.
Because that's what big clubs do.
That's what big clubs do. Yeah.
Big clubs will win away in Copenhagen on Wednesday night, so it'll be an interesting game. Thank you very much for your time, Tyrone.
Thank you, Stephen.
And thanks to listeners as usual. Just a quick shout out. We're about to hit 5,000 subscribers on YouTube, so head across there, subscribe, etc. And also a quick message from the producer. Head across and review the podcast, give it 5 stars. Feel free to slag off me and Tyrone if you want, but give it 5 stars and we'll be very happy with that. It helps the podcast out a lot. So thank you very much and have a great week. Take care.